Well, greetings. My name is Henry Jarrett, and I'm with the Methodist Federation for Social Action, the North Carolina Annual Conference. I'm glad you all could be here today. And the subject of the conference is called Voting Rights for All, but let me tell you just a little bit about the history of this conference. Back in 2008, a group of us met at Fairmont United Methodist Church, that is Methodist Federation for Social Action, and it was after Jack Crum, whom the conference is named after, had just passed away. And we were searching for something that how we could be more impactful on the conference, that is the North Carolina Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. And one of the things we thought about is having a conference that would take on issues that probably would not get discussed in the institutional church. And thus the idea of being prophetic, because sometimes institutional religion does not always back being prophetic. I would say that Jack Crum himself was a testimony about how the institution sometimes shies away from being prophetic. Jack Crum was a United Methodist pastor in North Carolina, and because of being prophetic about being against integration, against segregation, and being for social justice for the poor and whatnot, he consequently got moved around a lot. Kay Crum, who is his widow, is with us today, and we do thank Kay for her kind sponsorship of the event. But it was a very tough time if you were preaching against segregation, preaching about migrant workers, how they should be treated, anyone who is not regarded as part of the inside folks. So in 2008 we came up with the idea of doing a prophetic conference, and the first one was called Voices Cry in the Wilderness, and we did a workshops conference about those pastors and those persons within the church who had stuck their neck out for causes and paid a price. And similarly did the same thing in 2010. And then in 2011, we tackled the issue of diversity, which had become a big issue in Wake County about school diversity. And then in 2012, we did Amendment 1, another controversial topic. I'm sure George Reed can tell stories about the grief he got about that. And George Reed is here today. He's the executive director and is the retiring executive director. Next June, he'll be moving off into the sunset. Hopefully not too far off into the sunset. But he can probably tell you all the grief he probably got about the Council of Churches stance on Amendment 1. And then in 2013, we tackled the issue of child poverty. But along the way, we've found some partners to help us out with this. Among them is the North Carolina Council of Churches. We've also had the NAACP to be a co-sponsor of the event. Also, we've had generous support from the Conference Board on Church Society of the North Carolina United Methodist Conference of the United Methodist Church. And this year, we're joined by the Triangle Interfaith Alliance. So we're glad to have those partners sponsoring this event today. And the reason why we're doing voting rights today is voting rights is a serious issue. It's not an issue like trying to get Sudafed or trying to get a driver's license. People did not die to get driver licenses or to be able to get Sudafed. 50 years ago, 3 men died in Mississippi because they were trying to register voters. And if you've been watching the Roosevelts series on PBS the past 6 or 7 nights, they were presidents over 2 wars, which was over the issue of democracy. And part of democracy is about voting rights. North Carolina at one time was behind on the voting in terms of how many people participated. Then when the legislature decided to open up the franchise, we became one of the leading states. But now we have the reputation of having the most restrictive voting laws. So today what we're here about is talking about what the current laws are, and what you can do to get a voter ID, because that is a coming issue. You may not need a voting ID this year, but definitely in 2016, you will need to have a voter ID when you go to the voting, and they will ask you for it. unless one of the lawsuits that are pending actually is able to block that. And then the other is somewhat related subject is we're going to be talking about redistricting. So if you follow the agenda, we're going to have Alan is going to give a brief opening devotion for us, and then we'll have a little bit of a break, and then we'll have Senator Ellie Kennard talk about, give her keynote, and then we'll take another break, and then we'll move to our panel. And without further ado, Reverend Alan Felton, he is Vice President of MFSA, and he's also the pastor at Resurrection United Methodist Church here in Durham.
Henry, welcome to everyone. So nice to have you all here, and it's wonderful to be here. I confess that our devotionalist who was supposed to be here could not be with us, so Henry said, as a good president to his vice president, says, "Can you do a devotion?" About 10 minutes ago, I said, "Well, we're going to see how good Duke trained me in Bible here." I realize, though, that we don't have just Christians in our midst today, that we welcome our brothers and our sisters of other faiths, but I chose a scripture to read that I think can apply to all faith, and I chose to read from the book of Habakkuk, which you don't hear a whole lot of in churches, but Habakkuk chapter 2. And there we hear, I will stand at my watch post and station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what he will say to me and what he will answer concerning my complaint. Then the Lord answered me and said, "Write the vision. Make it plain on tablets so that the runner may read it. For there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end and it does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come, it will not delay. Look at the proud. Their spirit is not right in them, but the righteous live by their faith. Moreover, wealth is treacherous. The arrogant do not endure. They open their throats wide as Sheol. Like death, they never have enough. They gather all nations for themselves and collect all peoples as their own." And as I was thinking in the few minutes I had about this, the scripture came to me because it talks about the proud. The proud who are oppressing others for their own selfish gain. And this is not a partisan political conference. This is simply to raise awareness of an issue. But what we are seeing now in large part is a powerful group working to oppress the majority of people for selfish gain. And I think that is something we ought to not only raise up and be aware of, but to respond to, whether or not we are in the Christian faith or our Muslim brothers and sisters, our Buddhist brothers and sisters, whatever faith tradition we come from. I think we can agree that the divine power in the world is a power for justice, for righteousness, and that the most low and the most vulnerable are the ones that the divine has as a preoccupation, cares the most about, has a preference for, as you sometimes hear. And in terms of voting, the human expression of power is often exercised through those who hold public office. I retired after 15 years in politics and government. Senator Kennard and I have some association from those days where I would have to go in front of her and her committee and make reports. And she was very eager to hear what some of the things we were doing as they invested in our programs at the Revenue Department, where I was an undersecretary. And we exercise our power through our elected officials in many ways. And so it is important that all of us have that voice in selecting those who will represent us in the halls of power, in the halls of justice. And that's what this conference is about, is to ensure that all people all people have an equal voice in those decisions, that the decisions about those who hold political power are not made by a small minority for selfish gain, but by all of us for the common good. And that, I think, sets the stage for the things that you will hear today. So with that, let me close. We will have a short break, and then Senator Kennard's going to come up and lead us through very important aspects and details of the new voting law, so that we can be voices standing on the ramparts, letting our constituencies, letting our friends, letting our neighbors know what it means to hold the proud and the powerful accountable. Thank you and welcome again.